I'm Samantha Wilson, 32, and I never thought my family's Victorian home would cost me $280,000 and my relationship with my mother. That house held 5 generations of memories, from my great-grandparents to my teenage years. When I paid off my parents' mortgage to save it from foreclosure, I thought I was preserving our legacy. Instead, my mother vanished the next day with the deed and my money. Surprisingly, I laugh about it now. The lessons I learned were worth every penny. If you're watching this from somewhere where family betrayal feels all too familiar, drop your location in the comments below. Don't forget to hit subscribe and like this video if you want more stories about finding strength through life's toughest moments. Our family home stood proudly on Maple Street for over 100 years, a Victorian beauty with wraparound porches, ornate trim, and a character you just don't find in modern homes. The Wilson family had owned it since my great-grandfather Patrick purchased it in 1920. The place wasn't just a house, it was our history. Every door frame had pencil marks tracking generations of children growing taller. The oak tree in the backyard supported a treehouse my grandfather built for my father, which my father later renovated for me. I loved that treehouse. It was my sanctuary during childhood, especially when things got tense inside the main house, which happened increasingly as I grew older. My father, Howard Wilson, was everything you'd want in a dad. A high school history teacher for 35 years, he had a gentle patience that made him beloved by students and family alike. He coached Little League baseball on weekends and volunteered at the local Veterans Center. Everyone in town knew and respected Howard Wilson. My mother, Judith, was harder to know. She maintained a carefully crafted public image as the devoted teacher's wife and community volunteer, but behind closed doors, she controlled every aspect of our household with an iron grip. Her mood swings dictated the emotional weather of our home. When she was happy, the house felt warm and inviting. When she wasn't, which was often, we all walked on eggshells. Growing up, I naturally gravitated toward my father. We shared a love of books, baseball, and bad jokes. My mother viewed our close relationship with barely concealed resentment. "You two and your little secrets," she'd say with a tight smile when she'd catch us laughing together. There was never any secret, just a father and daughter who understood each other. My relationship with my mother was complicated at best. She had expectations for me that seemed impossible to meet. My A- grades should have been A+. My neat appearance could always be neater. My achievements were weaponized in her social circles, but rarely celebrated at home. Despite this, I craved her approval with an intensity that shaped many of my early decisions. I pursued accounting in college partly because it promised financial stability and partly because numbers made sense in a way my mother never did. They were reliable, consistent. And when you made a mistake, you could find it and fix it. By 22, I had my degree, a job offer from a respected firm in Boston, and my first apartment 40 miles away from Maple Street. The distance helped. I established my career, built meaningful friendships, created a life that was entirely my own. I visited home monthly for Sunday dinners, maintaining the connection with my father while keeping my mother at a manageable distance. Those visits followed a predictable pattern. Dad and I would catch up. Mom would showcase her latest home improvement or community accomplishment, and I'd leave feeling simultaneously relieved to escape and guilty for feeling that way. The first signs of trouble were subtle. Around my 20th birthday 4 years ago, I noticed changes in the house. The garden, once my mother's pride, looked neglected. Inside, small repairs remained undone, unusual for my father, who had always maintained everything meticulously. The gourmet meals my mother had always prepared for my visits were replaced with takeout, which she claimed was just more convenient. During one visit, I noticed past due notices from the utility company on the kitchen counter before my mother hastily gathered them up. When I asked if everything was okay financially, she bristled. "We've been managing money since before you were born, Samantha. We don't need financial advice from our daughter." My father, who had always been energetic despite his age, seemed increasingly tired. At first, I attributed it to normal aging. He was in his early 60s then. But when he fell asleep mid-conversation during one of my visits, I became seriously concerned. "Dad, are you feeling okay?" I asked when my mother stepped out to pick up dessert. "Just tired." "Sammy," he said, using my childhood nickname. "The doctor says my heart isn't pumping quite like it used to. Nothing to worry about." But there was worry in his eyes that contradicted his reassuring words. I later learned he had been diagnosed with a heart condition that required medication and reduced stress, information my mother had decided I didn't need to know about. As my father's health deteriorated, my mother became increasingly secretive about household matters. Mail disappeared into her purse before anyone could see it. Phone calls were taken in hushed tones behind closed doors. When I'd ask direct questions about their well-being, financial or otherwise, I'd get vague reassurances from Dad and defensive deflections from Mom. I should have pushed harder. I should have recognized the signs. But I was busy with my own life, a promotion at work, a serious relationship that ultimately didn't work out, my own financial goals. I trusted that my parents, adults who had managed their lives for decades before I came along, would ask for help if they truly needed it. That trust was misplaced. And my failure to look beyond the surface would cost me everything I had worked for. The call came on a Tuesday evening in March, just as I was finishing a complex audit for a major client. My father's voice sounded thin, fragile in a way I'd never heard before. "Sammy, I need to talk to you about something important," he said, his words careful and measured. "It's about the house." "What about it?" I asked, already feeling dread pool in my stomach. We're in some trouble. Financial trouble. The bank sent a foreclosure notice yesterday. The words hit me like a physical blow. Foreclosure? On the house that had been in our family for generations? It seemed impossible. "Dad, what happened? How much are we talking about?" His voice dropped to a whisper. "Your mother doesn't know I'm calling you. She'd be furious. But I don't know what else to do. It's bad, Sammy. Really bad." I drove to my parents' house that night, arriving just after 10. My mother answered the door in her bathrobe, surprise and irritation flashing across her face. "Samantha? What are you doing here so late?" "I need to talk to you and Dad," I said, stepping past her into the house. The familiar entrance hall looked the same as always, family photos lining the walls, the antique grandfather clock ticking steadily, but it felt different, as if the foundation beneath it had shifted. My father sat in his recliner in the living room, relief washing over his face when he saw me. He looked older than his 65 years, more gray, more stooped. "You told her," my mother accused, following me into the room. "After we agreed to handle this ourselves." "Handle what exactly?" I asked, keeping my voice steady despite the anger building inside me. "Because from what Dad tells me, there's a foreclosure notice on this house." That doesn't sound like handling anything. What followed was 3 hours of painful revelation. Through my father's halting explanations and my mother's defensive interruptions, I pieced together the financial disaster they were facing. The original mortgage had been paid off years ago, but my mother had taken out a new one without my father's knowledge, using forged signatures on documents. There were also multiple maxed-out credit cards, unpaid property taxes for the past 2 years, and personal loans from banks across 3 counties. The total debt, approximately $280,000. "What happened to the money?" I asked, struggling to comprehend the magnitude of the deception. My father looked at the floor. "Your mother has had some issues with gambling. Online mostly. But also trips to Atlantic City when she told me she was visiting her sister in Philadelphia." "That's a lie," my mother snapped. "I made investments that didn't work out. If you hadn't insisted on keeping this money pit of a house, we could have downsized years ago and been fine." As the night wore on, I discovered more shocking details. My mother had been hiding financial communications for years, intercepting mail, creating a separate email account for financial matters, even setting up a P.O. box to receive bills and notices. My father, trusting and increasingly ill, had no idea of the financial house of cards she had built until the foreclosure notice arrived in a county sheriff's envelope that she couldn't intercept. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" I asked my father, tears streaming down my face. "I was embarrassed," he admitted. "I should have paid more attention." Should have known something was wrong. And your mother kept saying she had it under control, that it was temporary. I did have it under control until your father's medical bills started piling up, my mother interjected. Do you have any idea what his heart medications cost? What the specialists charge? Insurance doesn't cover half of it. This triggered another painful revelation. My father's heart condition was far more serious than I had been led to believe. He had suffered a minor heart attack the previous year, followed by 2 surgeries and ongoing treatment that had indeed generated substantial medical bills. The next morning, while my mother was out running errands, I went through their financial documents. What I found made me physically ill. Bank statements showing regular withdrawals to online gambling sites. Credit card bills with charges for luxury items I'd never seen in the house. And most disturbing of all, multiple credit accounts opened in my father's name that he clearly knew nothing about. When confronted with this evidence, my mother broke down. Not in remorse, but in rage. You think you can judge me? You have no idea what it's like being trapped in this life. Your perfect father with his perfect reputation, while I gave up everything, my career, my dreams, to be Howard Wilson's wife and Samantha Wilson's mother. Mom, this isn't about your life choices. I tried to reason. This is about lying, stealing, and fraud. You committed identity theft against your own husband. I did what I had to do to survive, she shouted. And now you're ganging up on me, just like you two always have. The family meeting I had hoped would lead to solutions instead ended in a screaming match, with my mother storming out of the house and my father clutching his chest in distress. As I helped him take his medication, the magnitude of the situation became crystal clear. This wasn't just about saving a house. It was about saving my father's life. The stress of financial ruin and potential homelessness could literally kill him. Despite all the red flags and warning sirens going off in my mind, I made a decision that would change the course of my life. Dad, I said quietly, I'm going to help you fix this. The next morning, I sat in my car outside my financial advisor's office, staring at the spreadsheets I'd created overnight. I had meticulously cataloged my assets. My 401k with its healthy balance, after 8 years of maximum contributions, my emergency fund, my investment portfolio, and the down payment fund I'd been building toward buying my own home someday. Combined, I had access to just over $300,000. Enough to clear my parents' debt with a small cushion left over for emergencies. My financial advisor, Travis Kent, didn't try to hide his horror as I explained my plan. Samantha, I've worked with you for 6 years, he said, leaning forward across his desk. In that time, I've watched you make consistently smart, strategic financial decisions. This is neither smart nor strategic. This is financial suicide. It's my family home, I argued. It's where my dad needs to be, especially with his health condition. Houses can be replaced. Travis countered. Retirement savings in your 30s? Those years of compound interest can never be recovered. And forgive me for being blunt, but you're talking about giving your life savings to the same people, specifically your mother, who created this disaster through what sounds like criminal financial misconduct. His words stung because they echoed my own doubts. I had spent the night alternating between calculating numbers and questioning my sanity. Was I really considering emptying my accounts to save my parents from a mess largely of my mother's making? What about a smaller contribution? Travis suggested. Help them with a down payment on a more affordable place. Or have them declare bankruptcy. Yes, they'd lose the house, but at least they'd get a fresh start without you sacrificing your future. All logical solutions. All solutions that would mean losing the family home. I need to think about it, I told Travis, gathering my papers. Promise me you won't make any transfers until we talk again, he said. Take at least 48 hours. Please. I promised, but even as I said the words, I knew what my decision would be. Back at my parents' house, I found my father sitting alone in the kitchen, looking defeated in a way I had never seen before. Where's Mom? I asked. Bridge club, he said, though we both knew that was unlikely given the current circumstances. I sat across from him and reached for his hand. Dad, I'm going to pay off the debt. His head snapped up. Absolutely not. I didn't tell you about this for a handout, Sammy. I just needed advice. It's not a handout, I insisted. It's an investment in our family legacy. But I have conditions. Over the next hour, I outlined my plan. I would liquidate my investments and retirement accounts to clear the debt completely. In exchange, I wanted my name added to the house deed as co-owner. A legal agreement about future financial decisions, and complete transparency about my mother's gambling addiction and treatment plan. Your mother won't like this, my father warned. Especially the part about addiction treatment. This isn't negotiable, I said firmly. If I'm investing my future in this house, I need to know it won't happen again. And I'm scheduling an appointment with Marian Jacobs tomorrow to draw up the legal documents. Marian Jacobs had been our family lawyer for decades. She had handled my grandfather's estate and helped me with my first apartment lease. She also knew my mother well enough to understand the complexities of our situation. The meeting with Marian went exactly as I expected. She was professional but clearly concerned. This is an extremely generous offer, Samantha, she said, choosing her words carefully. But I would be remiss in my duties if I didn't advise you of the risks. Financial entanglements with family members, especially in situations involving addiction and deception, rarely end well. I understand the risks, I assured her. That's why I want everything documented legally. I need protection. Marian nodded and began drafting the agreement. It specified that in exchange for clearing all debts associated with the property, I would become a one-third owner of the house alongside my parents. Any future financial decisions involving the property would require unanimous consent from all owners. Additionally, my mother would commit to financial transparency and addiction counseling. When I presented the agreement to my parents that evening, my father signed immediately. My mother, however, read through it with increasing agitation. Addiction counseling? You're making me sound like some kind of junkie, she exclaimed, throwing the papers down. Mom, you've been hiding gambling debts for years, I said as calmly as I could. You nearly lost the family home. That's not normal behavior. I made some mistakes with money. That doesn't make me an addict. The argument went in circles for hours. Eventually, with my father's quiet pleading and my firm refusal to budge on the terms, my mother grudgingly signed the papers. But the resentment in her eyes as she did so should have warned me of what was to come. The process of liquidating my assets was painful, both emotionally and financially. Early withdrawal penalties on my retirement accounts, tax implications, and the loss of future growth all represented blows to the financial security I had carefully built. Each transfer felt like watching years of hard work evaporate. Travis called twice to try to talk me out of it. At least keep your emergency fund, he urged. Don't leave yourself completely vulnerable. But I was determined to clear the debt entirely, to give my father peace of mind and stability for his health to improve. I transferred the full $280,000 to the bank holding the mortgage, paid off the credit cards, and settled the tax liens. By Friday afternoon, just 3 days after learning about the crisis, I had completely resolved my parents' financial disaster and completely depleted my own resources. That evening, my father insisted on cooking a celebratory dinner. He prepared his famous pot roast, a dish usually reserved for major holidays and special occasions. My mother was unusually quiet during the meal, picking at her food and drinking more wine than usual. A toast, my father said, raising his glass. To Samantha, whose generosity and love have saved our home and given this old man peace of mind. My mother clinked her glass mechanically. Yes, to Samantha. Our financial savior, she said, her tone just short of sarcastic. As I drove back to my apartment that night, I felt strangely empty. I had expected to feel good about helping my parents, about preserving our family home. Instead, I felt uneasy, as if I had just made a terrible mistake but couldn't yet see exactly what it was. I would find out soon enough. The next morning, Saturday, I slept later than usual, exhausted from the emotional and financial marathon of the past few days. Just after 10, my phone rang. It was my father, his voice frantic. Sammy, she's gone. Your mother's gone. I sat bolt upright in bed. What do you mean gone? She wasn't here when I woke up. Her car is gone, and so is her suitcase. She left a note, but it doesn't make sense. You need to come over right now. 20 minutes later, I was racing up the front steps of the family home. My father met me at the door, still in his pajamas and bathrobe, looking disoriented and clutching a piece of paper. "Read it," he said, handing me the note written in my mother's familiar handwriting. "Howard, I've endured this life for 40 years. I deserve something for myself now. Don't try to find me. Judith." "Did she take anything else?" I asked, a growing sense of dread building inside me. "I don't know. Everything looks normal. But I haven't checked everywhere." Together, we went through the house, looking for any clues about my mother's sudden departure. Her closet was half empty, her jewelry box cleared of the valuable pieces, and her personal documents missing from the fireproof box in their bedroom closet. "Dad, where are the house documents?" "The deed and the papers we signed yesterday." His face went pale. "In my office desk." We rushed to his small home office. The drawer where he kept important documents was unlocked and empty. "They're gone," he whispered. "All of them." "It's okay," I said, trying to sound more confident than I felt. "Marion has copies of everything. Let me call her." But before I could reach for my phone, my father clutched his chest and stumbled backward. His face had gone from pale to gray. "Dad!" I screamed, catching him before he fell. "Dad, what's wrong?" "Chest hurts," he gasped. I called 911 immediately, then helped him to the couch and gave him his heart medication. The paramedics arrived within minutes and confirmed what I feared. My father was having a mild heart attack, likely triggered by the shock and stress of my mother's disappearance. As they loaded him into the ambulance, I kissed his forehead. "It's going to be okay, Dad. I promise. I'll take care of everything." While my father was being treated at the hospital, I began making calls. First to Marion Jacobs, who agreed to meet me at her office despite it being a Saturday. Then to the bank that held the mortgage I had just paid off. Then to the county property records office. The meeting with Marion confirmed my worst fears. "I don't understand how this could happen," I said, pacing her office. "We signed the agreement yesterday. My name should be on the deed as co-owner." Marion looked grim. "The agreement required the deed to be updated with the county recorder's office. That typically takes a few business days to process. Your mother must have moved very quickly." "What do you mean?" "According to the county records office, a new deed was filed this morning when they opened at 8. It removes your father's name completely and lists Judith Wilson as the sole owner of the property." "That's impossible," I exclaimed. "She would need his signature for that." Marion sighed heavily. "Samantha, given what you've told me about your mother's history of forging your father's signature on financial documents, I think we can assume she didn't suddenly develop scruples about this. But how could she file a new deed without the legal agreement we signed? The agreement was between you and your parents as individuals. It hasn't been recorded with the county yet. In the eyes of the property records office, she was a legal owner making a change to the deed. They wouldn't have any reason to question it. So she took my money, stole the house from my father, and just disappeared?" My voice broke as the full magnitude of the betrayal washed over me. "I'm afraid it appears that way," Marion said gently. "We can certainly challenge this legally. Fraud, elder abuse, breach of contract, there are multiple avenues to pursue. But legal remedies take time, and if your mother has fled the state." "What about the police?" "This is theft. We can absolutely file a police report, and I encourage you to do so immediately. But this will likely be treated as a civil matter rather than criminal, especially given the family relationships involved." I left Marion's office and went straight to the local police station. The officer who took my report was sympathetic but not optimistic. "Family financial disputes are complicated, ma'am," he explained. "Without clear evidence of criminal intent, this is likely to be handled in civil court." She took $280,000 of my money and disappeared with a house that should partially belong to me, I said, fighting back tears of frustration. "How is that not criminal intent?" "We'll certainly investigate," he assured me. "But you might want to prepare yourself for a lengthy legal process." By evening, my father was stabilized but still hospitalized for observation. I sat beside his bed, holding his hand as he drifted in and out of sleep, medication dulling the physical and emotional pain. When the nurse stepped out, he turned to me with tears in his eyes. "I'm so sorry, Sammy. This is all my fault. I should have seen what she was. Should have protected you." "Dad, no," I said firmly. "You're as much a victim as I am. More so. You spent 40 years with her." 43. He corrected weakly. 43 years believing I knew the woman I was married to. That night, I returned to the empty house alone. The silence was oppressive. I walked through the rooms that had once felt so full of family history, now tainted by deception. In my childhood bedroom, I finally allowed myself to break down completely. I had lost my savings, my retirement, my mother, and potentially the family home I had sacrificed everything to save. As I curled up on my old bed, surrounded by the remnants of a childhood that suddenly seemed like a lie, I hit rock bottom. The pain was physical, a hollowness in my chest that made it hard to breathe. I had trusted and been betrayed in the most fundamental way possible. By the person who should have protected me from harm, not caused it. That night, amid my tears, something hardened inside me. A determination not born of revenge, but of justice. My mother would not get away with this. Somehow, I would find her, confront her, and make this right for my father and for myself. My father remained in the hospital for 3 days. His doctors were clear. Stress had exacerbated his heart condition, and he needed rest, medication, and a calm environment to recover. The irony wasn't lost on me. The very house I had sacrificed everything to save was now a source of stress that threatened his health. While he recovered, I took action. First, I hired Diana Pierce, a private investigator recommended by Marion. Diana had specialized in family fraud cases for 15 years and understood both the legal and emotional complexities involved. "Your mother has been planning this for some time," Diana told me during our initial consultation. This wasn't a spontaneous decision. The speed and precision with which she moved suggests careful preparation. "But why now?" I asked. "Why wait until after I paid off the debt?" Diana's expression was sympathetic but direct. "Because now the house is free and clear. No mortgage, no liens, no encumbrances. It's worth about $450,000 in today's market. She couldn't have sold it or borrowed against it with all that debt. You essentially handed her a valuable, liquid asset." The realization made me physically ill. I had been so focused on saving the house that I hadn't considered I might be making it more valuable and therefore more tempting to steal. Over the next week, Diana uncovered patterns of deception that stretched back decades. My mother had maintained secret bank accounts throughout her marriage. She had previously borrowed money from my father's elderly mother before her death, money that was never repaid or mentioned again. She had taken out credit cards in the names of multiple family members, including an aunt who had spent her final years in a nursing home. "This is a lifelong pattern," Diana explained as she showed me her findings. "Your mother is what we sometimes call a systematic financial abuser. She identifies targets, exploits their trust, and moves on when the resources are depleted or she's at risk of exposure. But she stayed with my father for over 40 years, I pointed out. Your father provided stability, respectability, and steady income. Plus, there was the house, a significant asset she couldn't easily take without raising alarms. Until you created the perfect opportunity." With each new discovery, my image of my childhood and family life shifted. Arguments I had witnessed, unexplained tensions, my mother's controlling behavior around finances, all took on new meaning in light of what I now knew. Diana's investigation provided another shocking revelation. My mother had been in contact with a lawyer named Gerald Hoffman in the weeks before her disappearance. Hoffman was known among legal circles for handling questionable property transfers and had been disciplined by the Bar Association twice. He helped her prepare the fraudulent deed transfer, Diana explained. And based on the timeline, she contacted him before you even offered to pay off the debt. She was setting this up while simultaneously allowing you to believe you were saving the family home. The calculated nature of the betrayal was staggering. While I had been liquidating my life savings to help my parents, my mother had been planning to steal the house out from under both my father and me. Diana's digital tracking methods soon located my mother at a luxury resort in Naples, Florida. Social media posts from other guests showed her by the pool, shopping at exclusive boutiques, dining at expensive restaurants, living a life of leisure with what I could only assume was my money and the proceeds of a quick loan against a now debt-free house. She took out a home equity line of credit for $200,000 the same day she transferred the deed, Diana confirmed after checking county financial records. Between that and your $280,000, she's sitting on nearly $500,000. While pursuing the investigation, I had also been caring for my father, who had moved temporarily into my small apartment after his hospital release. The doctors had forbidden him from returning to the family home for fear the emotional associations would trigger another cardiac event. "I keep thinking I'll wake up, and this will all be a bad dream," he said one evening as we sat on my tiny balcony. "That Judith will be the woman I thought I married for all these years." "I know, Dad," I said, squeezing his hand. "I keep thinking the same thing about the mother I thought I had." Support came from an unexpected source when my father's sister, Aunt Leah, called after hearing about the situation. She and my mother had feuded years ago, resulting in Leah's effective banishment from family gatherings. Now I understood why. "She did the same thing to me 20 years ago," Leah revealed during a long phone conversation. "She borrowed $10,000 for what she claimed was a surprise anniversary trip for your father. I never saw that money again, and there was never any trip." When I confronted her, "She told your father I was trying to cause trouble in your family out of jealousy. Why didn't you tell us?" I asked. "I tried to tell your father, but Judith had already poisoned the well. He didn't believe me." After that, she made sure I was gradually excluded from family events. It was easier for everyone to believe I was the problem than to question Judith. Leah's experience reinforced what Diana had discovered about my mother's pattern of behavior. It also strengthened my resolve to confront her directly. "I'm going to Florida," I told Diana after receiving confirmation of my mother's location. "I need to face her." "Are you sure that's wise?" Diana cautioned. "We can handle this through legal channels. Confronting her personally could be emotionally devastating, and it might alert her to move or hide assets further." "I need to look her in the eye," I insisted. "I need to understand how she could do this to her family, to her own daughter." Diana reluctantly agreed to accompany me, both for emotional support and to document any statements my mother might make that could help our legal case. Before leaving, I consulted with Marian about our legal strategy. "We filed the initial complaints," Marian explained. "Fraud, elder abuse against your father, breach of contract. But as I warned you, these processes are slow. And if your mother has moved the money offshore or converted it to cash, recovery becomes much more difficult." "I understand," I said. "But I need to try. Not just for the money, but for justice." As I packed for the trip to Florida, my father watched anxiously from the doorway of my guest room. "I should come with you," he said. "Face her together." "Absolutely not," I replied firmly. "Your health comes first. Diana will be with me, and we'll record everything. You focus on getting stronger." The night before my flight, I couldn't sleep. I lay awake thinking about what I would say to the woman who had raised me, who had tucked me in at night and attended my graduation, who had also systematically deceived everyone who loved her and stolen my financial future without apparent remorse. What could she possibly say that would explain or justify such betrayal? And was I prepared to hear it? The Ocean View Resort in Naples lived up to its name, with pristine beaches and palm trees swaying in the gentle Florida breeze. Under different circumstances, it would have been paradise. Instead, it felt like the scene of a crime, which, in a way, it was. Diana and I had devised a simple plan. We knew my mother's habits from social media posts and the resort staff's information. Every morning at 9, she had breakfast on the outdoor terrace of the main restaurant. We would approach her there, in a public setting where she couldn't make a scene without drawing attention. "Remember," Diana cautioned as we positioned ourselves at a table with a view of the entrance, "our goal is to get her to acknowledge what she's done, ideally on record." Don't let anger derail that objective. I nodded, though my hands trembled slightly as I sipped my coffee. After a week of investigation and travel, the moment of confrontation was finally here. I had rehearsed what I would say countless times, but now all those carefully prepared words seemed inadequate. At precisely 9:07, my mother appeared. She wore a white linen dress, designer sunglasses, and an air of carefree luxury that made my stomach turn. She didn't notice us as she was escorted to her regular table and ordered her breakfast with a smile for the waiter. "Ready?" Diana asked quietly. I took a deep breath. "Ready." We approached her table casually. She was scrolling through her phone and didn't look up until I pulled out the chair across from her and sat down. "Hello, Mom." The color drained from her face as she recognized me. For just a moment, I glimpsed something like fear in her eyes before she composed herself. "Samantha," she said coolly. "This is a surprise." "Is it really?" I asked. "Did you think I wouldn't find you?" Her eyes flicked to Diana, who had remained standing slightly behind me. "And who is your friend?" "Diana Pierce, private investigator." Diana introduced herself professionally. "Mrs. Wilson, we're here to discuss the fraudulent property transfer and misappropriation of funds." My mother's laugh was brittle. "I have no idea what you're talking about. If you're referring to my house, it's been in my name for years. And any funds I have are mine legally." "We both know that's not true," I said, fighting to keep my voice steady. "You stole the house from Dad after I paid off the debt. You planned this all along." "Planned what?" "To finally have some freedom after 43 years of being Howard Wilson's perfect wife?" "Yes, I planned that." Her voice dripped with bitterness. "Do you have any idea what it's like to live your entire adult life as an accessory to someone else's story? This isn't about your marriage, Mom. This is about you committing fraud and theft. You took my life savings, money I gave to help you and Dad. Money you offered," she corrected. "Nobody forced you to empty your accounts, Samantha. That was your choice. Based on your lies. You knew I was adding my name to the deed. You signed the agreement." A couple at a nearby table glanced over curiously. My mother lowered her voice. "What did you expect? That I'd spend my remaining years watching you and your father congratulate yourselves for saving me? That I'd be grateful for the chance to continue living in that mausoleum of a house? Always the villain in your father-daughter love story." Her words struck deeper than I had anticipated. Not because they were true, but because they revealed how she had viewed our family all these years as a competition for affection that she believed she had lost. "Dad is in the hospital because of what you did," I said, my voice breaking despite my efforts to remain calm. His heart couldn't take the shock and betrayal. Something flickered across her face, regret, perhaps, or just annoyance at the complication. "Howard has always had a flair for drama. He'll recover." "Mrs. Wilson," Diana interjected smoothly, "I should inform you that this conversation is being recorded. Your acknowledgement of the property transfer could be valuable in the legal proceedings already underway." My mother's eyes narrowed. "Legal proceedings?" "Fraud, elder abuse, breach of contract." I listed. "Marion has filed the initial complaints. The police are investigating as well. You would drag your own mother through court?" She looked genuinely surprised, as if she had never considered I might fight back. "You stole my future," I said simply. "What did you expect me to do?" For a moment, something like uncertainty crossed her face. Then she leaned forward, her voice dropping to a whisper. "Let me explain something to you, Samantha. By the time your lawyers and the police finish their investigations, I'll be long gone. The money will be unreachable. The house will be sold to a buyer who has no idea of its contested status. You can waste years and more money fighting. Or you can accept what's happened and move on with your life. Those are your only real options." The calculated coldness of her statement stunned me. This was not a mother speaking to her daughter. This was a predator addressing prey. "Why?" I asked, the question that had tormented me for days finally escaping. "Why would you do this to your own family?" Her expression softened slightly. Perhaps the only genuine moment in our entire exchange. "Because I never had anything that was truly mine. Not the house, not the marriage, not even my relationship with you. Everything always belonged more to Howard than to me. This money, It's the first thing in my life that's completely mine." Before I could respond, she stood up, gathering her purse and sunglasses. "This conversation is over. If you contact me again, I'll file for harassment." As she walked away, Diana placed a comforting hand on my shoulder. We got what we needed. Her implicit acknowledgement of the transfer and the money will help our case. But I barely heard her. I was frozen, watching my mother, the woman who had given birth to me, raised me, shaped my understanding of family and trust, walk away without a backward glance, as if severing the connection between us meant nothing at all. Later that day, while Diana coordinated with law enforcement and Marion back home, I found myself drawn to my mother's hotel room. Diana had managed to obtain the room number through her investigative channels. And though she had advised against going there alone, I couldn't help myself. Using a story about delivering forgotten documents, I convinced a sympathetic housekeeper to let me in while my mother was at the spa. I wasn't sure what I was looking for, perhaps some sign of remorse, some evidence that she wasn't the cold, calculating person who had dismissed me at breakfast. What I found instead was more evidence of her careful planning. Notes about offshore accounts, research on countries without extradition treaties, brochures for properties in Costa Rica, and most painfully, a journal that detailed her resentments and plans dating back years. One entry from nearly 2 years earlier read, "H's health declining. Could be an opportunity if managed correctly. S has money now. Always daddy's girl. Might be leverage." She had been plotting this when my father first became ill, seeing his heart condition not as a family health crisis, but as a potential opportunity to manipulate me. I photographed the evidence for Diana and left before I could be discovered. On the flight home the next day, I felt strangely hollow, as if the confrontation had drained something vital from me. The mother I had known was gone, had perhaps never really existed. In her place was a stranger who had viewed her family as obstacles or resources, never as people to love. When I returned to my apartment, I found my father looking stronger than when I'd left. He had followed his medication regimen religiously and even begun gentle exercises approved by his doctor. "How did it go?" he asked anxiously. I considered softening the truth, protecting him from my mother's coldness. But hadn't deception caused enough damage already? "She's not coming back, Dad," I said gently. "And I don't think she's sorry." His eyes filled with tears, but he nodded. "I've been thinking a lot while you were gone. About our marriage, about the signs I ignored. I think I've been grieving the loss of something that was never real to begin with." His insight mirrored my own emotional journey. We weren't just dealing with the loss of money or property, but with the shattering of a family narrative we had both believed in. That evening, while organizing the evidence Diana needed for our legal fight, I came across an old photo album in my father's belongings. Inside was a picture of my mother as a young woman, before she met my father. She stood next to an older woman with the same sharp features and cold eyes. "Who's this?" I asked my father, showing him the photo. "Your grandmother Eleanor," he replied. "Your mother's mother." They had a difficult relationship. Eleanor was hard on Judith, controlled all the family money, used it to manipulate Judith and her siblings. Your mother broke contact with her years before you were born. Something clicked into place, a missing piece of the puzzle. "Dad, do you think Mom learned this behavior from her mother? The financial control, the manipulation." He considered this thoughtfully. "It's possible. She never talked much about her childhood, but the few times she did, it didn't sound happy. Eleanor would give and withhold money as reward and punishment. Maybe Judith felt like taking financial control was her way of never being vulnerable again." This possible insight into my mother's psychology didn't excuse her actions, but it helped me begin to understand them. She had recreated the very dynamic she had suffered under, becoming the person who had hurt her. That night, lying in bed, I had an epiphany. I had been focused entirely on recovering what was taken, the money, the house, and punishing my mother. But what if that path led me to become consumed by bitterness and revenge, just as she had been? The next morning, I called Marion. "I want to pursue the legal case to recover what I can," I told her. "But I also want to be realistic about my expectations. And whatever happens, I need to move forward with my life. That's very wise, Samantha, she replied. Legal remedies are important, but they can't heal emotional wounds. Over the following weeks, I adjusted my focus. While Diana and Marion continued their work on the legal front, I concentrated on rebuilding, not just financially, but emotionally. I helped my father find a therapist specializing in betrayal trauma. I returned to work, explaining my situation to my understanding employers. And I began to envision a future not defined by what I had lost, but by what I could still create. A month after the confrontation in Florida, Travis, my financial advisor, called me. I heard what happened, he said. I'm so sorry, Samantha. If you're ready, I'd like to help you develop a recovery plan. It won't replace what you lost overnight, but we can rebuild your financial foundation step by step. His kindness and practical support touched me deeply. I'd like that, I said. I need to start somewhere. As spring turned to summer, the legal proceedings moved forward slowly. We recovered some assets. A portion of the home equity line my mother had taken out was frozen before she could transfer it offshore. But much of the money was indeed gone, just as she had predicted. The house remained in legal limbo, its ownership contested. But something surprising happened. As the weeks passed, both my father and I realized we no longer wanted it. That house holds too many memories now, my father said one evening as we walked through a park near my apartment. Not just the good ones from my childhood or yours, but the deception that took place within those walls for decades. I nodded, understanding completely. It feels tainted now. What if we let it go, he suggested. Not give up the legal fight, but emotionally detach from the outcome? Whatever happens with the house, we still have each other. We still have a future. His words crystallized the change that had been taking place within me. The house had been a symbol of family history and stability. But real stability didn't come from a building, it came from honest relationships and inner strength. That realization marked the true turning point in my journey, not the confrontation with my mother, but the decision to prioritize healing over revenge, future over past. 1 year after discovering my mother's betrayal, I stood in the kitchen of a modest bungalow, unpacking dishes with my father. The legal battle had finally reached its conclusion, not with the complete victory we had once hoped for, but with a compromise that allowed us to move forward. The court had recognized the fraud committed by my mother, but had been limited in its power to recover assets she had successfully hidden or spent. The family home had eventually been sold through a court-ordered process, with the proceeds divided according to the judge's ruling, 40% to my father and me, 60% to my mother's estate. She had refused to return for the proceedings, communicating only through her attorney. My portion, just over $90,000, was far less than the $280,000 I had lost. But combined with my father's share and what we had managed to recover from the frozen bank accounts, it gave us enough to start fresh. We used the money to purchase this small but charming 2-bedroom house with a garden my father had already begun transforming. What do you think about putting herbs along the south wall? He asked as we took a break from unpacking to enjoy coffee on the back patio. Basil, thyme, rosemary, things we can actually use. I think it's perfect, I replied, smiling at his enthusiasm. At 66, he looked younger than he had a year ago. His heart condition was stable, managed through medication and the significant reduction in stress that had come with acceptance and new beginnings. The journey to this point had not been easy. After the initial shock and betrayal, we had both gone through periods of anger, grief, and self-recrimination. My father had struggled with shame over not recognizing his wife's true nature during their decades of marriage. I had battled regret over my financial decisions and periodic bouts of financial anxiety as I rebuilt my savings from scratch. Therapy had been essential for both of us. My father worked with a counselor specializing in betrayal trauma, while I found help through both individual therapy and a support group for victims of financial fraud. Slowly, we had processed our grief and learned to trust again, starting with each other and gradually expanding to include new people in our lives. Professionally, I had not only returned to my accounting firm, but had developed a new specialty in forensic accounting and fraud prevention, turning my painful experience into expertise that could help others. My firm had been supportive throughout, even offering me a flexible schedule during the most intense periods of the legal proceedings. "Have you heard from Travis lately?" my father asked, interrupting my thoughts. I smiled at the mention of my former financial advisor, now a more significant presence in my life. What had begun as professional support during my financial rebuilding had gradually evolved into friendship and, eventually, something more. We were taking things slowly, both aware of my lingering trust issues, but the relationship had become an unexpected bright spot in my recovery journey. "He's coming over tomorrow to help with the bookshelves," I replied. "And he's bringing dinner." My father nodded approvingly. "I like him. He sees your strength, not just what happened to you." That observation touched on something fundamental about my healing process. For months after the betrayal, I had defined myself as a victim of my mother, of financial fraud, of my own naivete. That self-perception had been as damaging as the actual losses, limiting my ability to envision a different future. The turning point had come during a therapy session when my counselor had asked a simple but profound question: "Who were you before this happened, and who do you want to be after it?" The question had forced me to recognize that while the experience had changed me, it didn't have to define me. I could incorporate the lessons without surrendering my identity to them. As for my mother, we had received occasional reports of her whereabouts, Costa Rica, then Belize, through Diana's continued monitoring. She had indeed managed to hide a significant portion of the money, just as she had predicted. The legal authorities had limited reach across international borders, especially for what was classified as a family financial dispute rather than a major criminal case. At first, each update about her comfortable exile had triggered fresh anger and resentment. But gradually, those emotions had lost their power over me. I no longer needed her punishment to validate my recovery. Her absence from our lives had become, ironically, a kind of gift, allowing both my father and me to build something healthier than what we had known before. "Do you ever wonder if she's happy?" my father asked one evening, the question arising unexpectedly during dinner. I considered this thoughtfully. "I think she's comfortable. But happy? I don't know if she knows what that really means. She spent her whole life taking from others rather than building anything genuine. That's not happiness, it's just acquisition." He nodded slowly. "I've come to think she was running from something all along. Some emptiness she couldn't fill, no matter how much she took." This perspective, seeing my mother as damaged rather than simply evil, had been another important step in our healing. Not to excuse her actions, but to understand them and ensure we didn't perpetuate the same patterns. The financial rebuilding continued steadily, if slowly. Travis had helped me develop a realistic recovery plan that balanced immediate security with long-term growth. I would never recover the full amount I had lost. The compound interest on those early retirement contributions was irreplaceable, but I had adjusted my expectations and timeline accordingly. More importantly, I had developed a healthier relationship with money itself. Before the betrayal, financial security had been a goal I pursued somewhat unconsciously, following the conventional wisdom about savings and investments. Now, I understood more deeply what money could and couldn't provide. It could offer practical stability, but not emotional security. That had to come from within and from authentic connections with others. One unexpected source of support had been my Aunt Leah, who had re-entered our lives after decades of estrangement. Her own experience with my mother's manipulation had created a bond of understanding, and she had become a regular visitor to our new home, bringing with her family stories and photos that helped my father reconnect with his own history beyond his marriage. "Remember when I first found out about the foreclosure?" I asked my father as we finished our coffee on the patio. If someone had told me then that a year later we'd be sitting here, in a different house, with different perspectives, actually feeling okay, I wouldn't have believed them. "I wouldn't have either," he admitted. "Back then, I thought losing the house meant losing everything. I couldn't see that what mattered was never the building itself. And that was the truth at the heart of our journey. The physical house, the structure I had sacrificed so much to save, had never been what truly mattered. What mattered were the relationships, the trust, the authenticity we had managed to salvage and rebuild from the wreckage of betrayal. This realization explained the apparent contradiction in the title of my story. I paid off my parents' $280,000 debt to save our family home. Next day she vanished with it, I laugh. The laughter wasn't about humor in the conventional sense, but about the liberating perspective that comes with time and healing, the ability to see that what seemed like an ending had actually been the beginning of something more genuine. Today, when I look back at that devastating period, I can indeed laugh, not with bitterness, but with the wisdom of someone who has discovered that true security isn't found in buildings or bank accounts, but in the courage to face truth, the strength to begin again, and the capacity to create meaning from even our most painful experiences. Have you ever had to rebuild your life after a significant loss or betrayal? What helped you find your way forward? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. Sometimes sharing our journeys can help others find their path through similar challenges. And if my story resonated with you, please consider subscribing and sharing it with someone who might need to hear that healing is possible, even after the deepest betrayals. Thank you for being part of this community where we can transform our painful experiences into wisdom that lights the way for others. I'm grateful for each of you.